Okay, guys, today I will be interviewing an author who have written an amazing book, Imagining the World into Existence. Normandi, how you say your last name?
Ellis.
Alice, right. But before we do the interview, guys, I will be turning to Yo! I'm embodied the spirit of Pharaoh, the Pharaoh Atem. That's cool. All right, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for doing this interview today. I would like before how did can you introduce to yourself to the audience, please?
Sure. My name's Normandi Ellis. I have been leading trips to Egypt since 1991. I've written 13 books, most of them on ancient Egypt. I read and translate hieroglyphs. My first book was called Awakening Osiris, and it translated the Book of the Dead. So, and I live in Camp Chesterfield, Indiana, which is a spiritualist community. So I'm a medium and an astrologer as well as a tour leader.
Okay. How did you before I ask you about your book, how did you get into studying Egypt mystery? Now I'm very into Egypt and I love Egypt for its mysteries. How did you get into it?
Well, it's very mysterious how I got into it. Um, I had a I had a friend who convinced me that I should buy the Egyptian Book of the Dead and just read it. And he was a Rosicrucian, and he had been taught how to assist souls in transition when he was in Vietnam. So anyway, so I bought this book, and he left, and I didn't hear from him again, and it turned out that he died. So the book gained this kind of heaviness or vibration around it, and it was like it became important for me to do something with it. So while I was getting a degree at the University of Colorado, I translated the book and just got obsessed with it. It took 10 years to translate it, and I just loved it. And I almost threw it away, and one night the spirit of my friend appeared in the back of my car just as I was headed up the hill to throw everything I'd done in the dumpster. And he put his hand on me, and I mean, it was like I stuck my finger in a light socket. So his spirit convinced me not to throw the manuscript away that I'd been working on. And I guess maybe a couple of months later, a publisher came to me and said, "You wouldn't happen to have a book of all that work you've been doing?" And I said, "Yeah." So that was my first book. So a spirit kept me, engaged me in Egypt and kept me interested in Egypt. And it was the Book of the Dead. And that really is about, it's really called the Book of Coming into Light. And it means how to turn death consciousness into life consciousness. That's what that means.
Right. Thank you. But before that, I would like you to say thank you for so much for your hard work because um, I don't want to offend anyone. Before that, I was trying to. I bought your book and I read a little bit and it's very interesting. Um, because my whole thing about Egypt, it's I I guess you could say I grew up with like kind of like a Egypt background. Well, not Egypt background, but like involved with Egypt, right? With the what is it? This anime. It's about like a kid who
Hold it up. I want to see it again. I want to see it.
uh
Okay.
yeah it's Yugioh and it's evolved. So basically it evolved around Egypt, and it's very interesting that it said that there's a history of games. It's basically about starting in the Egypt, right? And it has there's this kid who has the pyramid of medallion, and when he get into trouble, he transformed into this pharaoh, and his name is Atem. That's why when I do the Yu-Gi-Oh, he transformed, and they play games like with cards, but it also has Egyptian god cards. They have the Slifer the Sky Dragon. It's Osiris. Like, but the Japanese version is Osiris, but they changed it to English is Slifer the Sky Dragon, and the other one is the winged dragon of Ra, right? The god of Egypt, and the other one is obelisk. Of course, we know the obelisk is the, you know, the like pencil, right, where they have the Washington D.C., but they turn into god cards. So that's why it's. But thank you so much for your work, though. Like my when I told my friend, he's like, you know, he didn't believe in that, so I kind of stopped reading it for a while. But I got back into it because I I study alchemy, right? I try to study alchemy, and I try to read alchemy because I interview like authors with into alchemy, and also the alchemists, and also for when you translate the Literature of the dead, how what can you give away from that, like to the audience?
You mean, how did I translate it? How did I learn to translate it?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, one of the things that I did is that I got a copybook and I copied down every single hieroglyph that was in the Wallace Budge book, Papyrus of Ani, because he had gathered together this book, but I didn't like his translation. And so I wanted to translate it for myself. So I copied all of the glyphs down, and then I left a lot of room between them. And I got some good hieroglyphic transcriptions, grammar dictionaries, history, metaphysics, just all kinds of stuff. And under each glyph, I would make a note about what it was doing. Not only what the story was behind the image, but how the image worked almost like a dream image, and how the sound of it is kind of like in ancient Egypt, it's like a pun, you know, like just easy example. The word for a fly is called ZTZT, zit zit. So it's like the sound of that the fly makes, you know. And lots of words, you know, they are musical. And so it's just, I played with the language. I played with it as if it were a poem rather than a word for word translation. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense. You also say in the earlier you said what was that, into light or something?
Yeah, it's the Book of Coming into Light is the real name of the Egyptian Book of the Dead. I mean, English-speaking people called it the Book of the Dead because they found it inside the coffins with dead people, but that's not what the title of the book was. It was the Book of Turning into Light, or Coming into Light, and it was really about how to turn death consciousness into light consciousness. Or another word for the translation is the secret of Osiris becoming Ra. So how the dead god turns into the resurrected god of light.
Right. How can you? I'm actually curious how to like they turn Osiris into Ra, or can you explain deeper, please?
Right. And, you know, when the sun sets in the west, it goes underneath into the underworld, and that's the realm of Osiris. And then when it rises again in the east, it turns into Ra. So you could think of it as like, you know, the sun in its solar arc, but you could also think of it as like, I don't know, sometimes if you think of any of those dying and resurrecting gods in any of the traditions, like Christian or you know, Celtic or Mayan, you know, they're all pretty similar. It's all about turning toward the light.
Right. And also I noticed back then I was starting someone say like hour is actually Horus, while when the sun set is actually set. Is that true?
Yes, Set. Well, actually, Osiris, when the two brothers are born, they're kind of like Cain and Abel, you know? And when the two brothers are born together, Osiris is given the Black Land, or the land of Egypt, or the word for the Black Land of Egypt is called Kem, the land of Kem, from which we get the word alchemy. It's the black arts from the land of Egypt. Now, the red land is all the desert land, and Set's given the red land. And the word for red is actually Deser, And then the T, it indicates that it's a piece of land. So desert is actually an ancient Egyptian word. Kind of interesting. And that's the land that Set has, okay, which doesn't grow anything. So that's why he's constantly in battle with Osiris.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. I think have you get the chance to watch the Gods of Egypt movie?
Oh man, I didn't. By Neil Gaiman.
Uh,
Oh my God, I love him. I think he's just this fabulous writer, and I haven't seen it yet.
oh my, because I actually wanted to talk to you about it too, because I know that your whole life you've been involved around studying Egypt and stuff like that, and you're promoting your book. That's why it's amazing work of art. They have Thoth in it, the God of Wisdom. It's so amazing. I think I highly recommend you watch it. It's really amazing.
Oh, I know, I know.
But
Yeah.
also, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say there's not a theater where I live. We're kind of in a very small community, and I have to drive about 40 miles to go to the theater, so I didn't see it.
Okay. But the reason why I got involved around with is Paulo Coelho book, The Alchemist, and The Secret, right? But the thing is, I want to expand it more. The Secret talk about the Emerald Tablet, the
Oh,
seven
yeah.
the seven hermetic principles, the law of vibration and the law of polarity. Because I listened to when you talk about the law of polarity, the law of cause and effect. All these principles are just universal laws. But I'm curious, why did you create your amazing book, which I really highly recommend everybody to read it if you're into Egypt? Um, why did you create your book, Imagining the World into Existence? What is it about, and what's your message that you're trying to convey to the readers?
Well, I think I was really, when I first started that book, I was really intrigued by the fact that there's more than one creation myth in the Egyptian mystical tradition. I mean, Thoth creates the world with his caduceus. He stirs it in a cauldron, and things divide and separate into 8 beings. They're male and female light, male and female darkness, male and female time, and male and female space. And he's kind of like the Big Bang, that comes into existence. I kind of think of Thoth that way. Or you could think of him, because he's also like a scientist and a mathematician. And so one of the things that he says while he's stirring this cauldron is, first I was 1, then I was 2, then I was 4, then I was 8, and then I was 1 again. And it's kind of like cells dividing, or you could think of it like DNA strands connecting, the 8 strands. So it's related to numerology and mathematics and science. And I was fascinated with his story. Then there's Khnum, who makes people kind of like Yahweh does out of clay. He puts them on his potter's wheel. And so he's more of a artistic crafter, right? And we hear that story in Genesis about how, God made people out of clay, Yahweh did, and so does Khnum. And in fact, they share an island where each of them has a temple side by side in the ancient traditions. We go and visit them when we're on our trips, both temples. Then there's a God who creates the world into being by speaking it, and so he's more like the law of thought. And it's like when we think things, it's like the word for creation over the water, the vibration of the breath and the sound over the water. And his name is Ptah. And so that's how he creates. There's another God who has more of a sexual manner of creating. So there's just these different creation myths. There's a woman whose name is Neith, and she's the great water, and she reaches into herself and pulls all these, like a net, she pulls all these beings out. She reaches into the great depths of herself and pulls out fish and crocodiles and hippos and whales, and then she pulls out trees and birds and flowers and people and stuff like that. And cats. She pulls out cats. See, look, I pulled out a cat. So, yeah, so there are all these different ways of creating something. And that's what got me started working on this book, is to think about how are all the ways that we humans who are co-creators with the divine, how do we make and express ourselves? You know, what are our talents? Some of us are artists, some are scientists, you know, some are mathematicians, some are writers, you know, some of them just, you know, psychically pull things out of their depths. So I thought about it all those different ways. And then what do we do with it after that? And then that's the rest of the book, you know. And spend a lot of time talking about Tutankhamun, who has this really interesting magical text, these 4 shrines. And I wanted to retranslate those and think about that. So I put that in the book as well. And there's lots of stories, myths of the great magician Kamwast in ancient Egypt. And so it has a lot of tales about him and tales about Isis and her life story, and which is really a woman's life story, you know. It's my story. I was a single mom. I raised a kid by myself, you know, and all the things I had to go through. And it was kind of like Isis, the same story. So anyway, that's kind of where it all came from.
Well, thank you so much. Can you tell me more about your stories and how you're related to ISIS, and talk about more?
Well, sure. I think that, like I said, I'm a single mom. She was a single mom. I think that a lot of women, especially in this culture these days, are spending a lot of time trying to do double duty, you know, like work in their communities as ISIS delivered babies, or taught women how to, you know, take care of their children, to midwife the births. She relied on her sisters. There were these snake goddesses who helped her raise her child and protect him while she was out working. Heaven knows I needed my sisters to help me do that. Not my physical sisters, but my spirit sisters, you know, the whole takes a village to raise a child kind of sisters, you know. And so my story was very similar to hers. My story also is about a time where I felt that I was kind of trapped and couldn't really do what I needed to do. And there's a part of the Isis story where she's trapped in the prison that Set makes her, and she has to, you know, Thoth has to convince her that she has to find a way out. And that was true. I had a mentor who came to me and helped me. It's like she lifted up a rock and said, Normandi, come out from under there. And that was Jean Houston. She was my Thoth. You know, she actually became a very good friend of mine. So things like that, different stories that of the goddess that I find parts of our lives, you know, are like that. You know, each one of us, there's a part of the pattern that becomes part of our mythic pattern, you know, and we're like living out these stories that are divine stories of creation and separation and really wisdom teachings. So.
Right. Thank you so much for telling the story. Yes, I remember what you say. So oftentimes we don't see ourselves as creators, right? We don't see ourselves like we can literally create anything that we want with our mind, right? But so oftentimes we're stuck in this finite world that we live in, right? We call reality. But there's so many different realities. It's had to do with our minds, right? Um, I would like to before that. I would like where is it? I'm trying to look because okay, here we go. Yeah, this one I want to interested in. What's the hieroglyphic image and what does it do?
Well, hieroglyphs, it's pretty interesting to me because the ancient Egyptians used hieroglyphs as oracles, as well as they were, you know, they were written and they were what we'll call spells. Okay, let me back up. They use the hieroglyphs to create ritual affirmations. I'm going to call them affirmations. People call them spells, but you know, anytime you write something, you have to put the right words in the right sentence and the right intonation and the right intent. And that basically was the definition of Egyptian language, which they called Heka. Heka. Okay. Heka is like the magical utterance, the way that we put our expression in our heart and our intention and our mind. We set what's in our mind into the language, and we can create realities that way. And so ancient Egypt, you know, they believed that was a magical incantation. That was a way to pray. Now the Greeks took that and kind of twisted it around, and they took Heka and made it into hex, you know, like saying a negative spell on something. But another translation of Heka is effective utterance. And I think the translation in Japanese, you'll have to let me know if I'm correct or not, of haiku means beautiful sentence. And that's what someone translated it as, beautiful sentence. And I thought a haiku and a Heka as an effective utterance, they're kind of the same thing. They're just a different way of saying poetically and powerfully what's inside the heart, you know. And so that's the key to understanding the hieroglyphs. So when I was working with them, you know, I would do a lot of research on them. And it would take me all day in meditation and revision and, you know, really working with my guides to translate one sentence, you know, because there's just so much that's inside that one sentence. And sometimes I would fall asleep on top of my books, and then I'd wake up and I'd have the answer, but it wasn't from me. It was from like my unconscious had, you know, my guides helped me write it. So yeah, the hieroglyphs are very interesting. And right now I've started, I'll show you this. I've started the process of creating hieroglyphs as oracles. So I have like a deck of cards. I don't know if you can see this card or not. Can you see that?
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
Okay. So, oh, it's upside down. So let me put it right side up. Okay, so that's Ptah. That's the card of Ptah. And that's the God who creates the world by speaking them into being. And you see right at the edge here, there's a little mouth with little drops of light coming out of it. I don't know if you can see the mouth with the drops of light coming out. Got that?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's how his words, you know, are like seeds of light when he speaks the world into being. So I use these cards as a way to, almost like tarot cards, to interpret them, because I've gotten so used to looking at the hieroglyphs. And the ancient Egyptians used the hieroglyphs as dream interpretation. The scribes who understood all about how the hieroglyphs worked as sounds and symbols and myths understood that the mind taught us through the symbol. And so there was a hieroglyphic dictionary that was made up of, you know, things that appeared in people's dreams. And lots of times when I lead trips to Egypt, people come back and they say, oh, I dreamed about the Ankh, you know, and it's like, well, sure you did. You know, you're dreaming about your life. You know, you're dreaming about how to make something come into being. You know, I dreamed about a dung beetle. Well, of course you did. You're trying to learn how to turn a negative, which is a dung ball, into a positive, which is the light that the Kephara in the myth is pushing over the horizon. So, you know, it shows up in our dreams, and they used those as interpretations.
Yes. But I do believe that dreams are really powerful, because it can tell you also dreams it's a symbolic symbol, because I was studying I read Carl Jung stuff, and it's
Right.
and dreams also can tell you a lot of things that what your subconscious is telling you, because I study also subconscious, and I remember back then when I was in college, I because it also had to do with fear too. Because
Right.
right, I was dreaming about how I was going to be late in college, and the dream would like tell it would become a dream, and it tell me that I shouldn't be late, like the fear, like so often time. But thank you so much for that. Let me see.
Yeah.
Oh, this one. Okay, what? Let me see. If a person wants to become an author, a writer, what is for the process for writing your book, and what do you get to do? What you do to get it published?
Oh, okay. Gosh, all I can tell you is what I did, and hope, because publishing's changing a lot. So what I did is that I started out by writing things and putting them in little magazines. And I would say these days it also includes having a blog, you know, writing for some kind of other blog, you know. I, I think that just getting your name out there, getting people to read what you're doing is part of the process, and continuing to write, get up every day. And for me, I would always get up before the sun came up, and I always have a desk that faces east. Just because I like to write in the dark and then see the sun coming up. It just feels like, it's like giving the power to the words that I'm putting down. So, but find your time. Some people are late night writers, some people are early writers, but always every day write something for at least an hour. And then publish it, put it out there. When you have enough essays that you've written as blog pieces or short stories that you've published in different little magazines, collect them together. And if you want, you can send them out to a book publisher, or you can do it yourself. I was lucky that a publisher came to me and asked me for my first book. So I didn't have to go through having to find the right publisher. But that can be very disappointing sometimes. I mean, I have had a lot of disappointments in hoping a manuscript or an essay would be somewhere and it was different. It's well, no, that's not what we're interested in. So but just keep doing it, because eventually it'll happen. Something will happen.
Uh-huh.
If you just keep putting it out there. And then the other thing about being an author is you have to do promotion all the time promotion, like you do with your YouTube, all the time promotion. Put your face in front of people, and once you write it, you have to keep writing it. You have to do the next one. So, in the process of these last 30 years, I've done 13 or 14 books. I'm writing 2 right now, so.
But I'm grateful for you though. I really love your work. So keep up the amazing work. It's just that I guess what my thing is I did want to write a book, but I guess I had so many fear around it, right? Because I thought, because basically what happened is I don't have enough experience to be able to teach people or to write my message, because my message or is evolved around the law of attraction. Because I see a lot of people suffer around the law of attraction. They would learn like law of attraction stuff, but they wouldn't go after their dream. And then and
Right.
right, and I feel like I have a fear because I don't have enough experience to be able to help anyone to go after their dream. That's why I waited so long to write a book.
Right. Well, you just keep doing it. I mean, write a blog. The other thing, which is if you're a speaker, is to get dragon speaking, and then just take the YouTubes or the talks that you've given and translate them into language. And then you don't have to like sit there and type it, that can help, because a lot of times the typing it, we're so worried about punching the right keys that we're not thinking about what we're saying. So, you could try that and see if that works. But I really think you're already doing it. It's just getting it on the piece of paper and sending it out,
You're talking about
getting
repurpose,
it in the computer and sending it out.
right? Thank you. You're talking about repurposing it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, oh yeah, before that, you were because this is one of also my question because my YouTube channel it revolve around helping people to release their potential. I notice a lot of spiritual people and a lot of law of attraction. They think like winning it's like competition, but also for you, you were talking about you have disappointment. How did you overcome fear, and how do you have any fear, and how did you overcome it?
Oh, well, let's see. I think I had to learn to overcome fear early on because I know this sounds like a silly response, but I broke out my front teeth when I was a little kid. They were the brand new permanent teeth, and I just totally busted them out. Had to have caps put in. And because I was a child, I would have to keep having them redone because my mouth kept growing. And I hated the dentist. I hated the dentist. And I finally was able to go to the dentist because I found this little poem. So it was a little tiny poem, like a haiku, a magical utterance that I could say while I was in the dental chair. And I still remember it. It goes like this: do the thing you're most afraid of. Never let it know you fear it. Danger only hurts the body, but it's fear that kills the spirit. And I would say that over and over to myself. And so I think that the main thing that any alchemist or metaphysician or magical being has to have in their repertoire is not only the knowledge of what it is that they want to do, but the willpower to, the oomph, the drive to say, okay, I will do this, and then do it. And then the other thing is to hold whatever it is that you're doing so dear that you don't talk about it to just anybody. It's kind of like if you're making bread, you don't keep opening the oven door to show people what the bread looks like. If you're having a baby, you can't take it out and show everybody what it looks like while it's cooking, right? So it's like holding that thing that you're making, your book or whatever, holding it so precious while it's in process. And then when it's done, you can take it out and show someone. So it's that's called the 4 powers of the Sphinx. And Eliphas Levi talks about it. He says it's to know, to will, to dare, and to keep silent. Those are the 4 powers of the Sphinx. And that's how all metaphysicians create, is through that process.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. I wanted to get into the definition. What is your definition of winning?
Well, it's interesting because you mentioned ago, some people think that it's about competition, but I don't. I think that winning is about only competing with yourself, to do something better than you did it before, to have a thought and then have a thought on top of that that's even better than that. So it really is a process of development. For me, winning is a process of development. And when I say that, I don't just mean a project, I mean your spirit. It's a process of developing your spirit, of getting better and better at what you do, at getting happier and happier with who you are. That's really, it's happier and happier with who you are and better at what you do. And more and more alive with your own idea that you have co-creative power with the divine. That, to me, is winning.
Right. Thank you so much. You talk about a lot about divine. How can we, for as spiritual as I am, I'm not spiritual. I don't have any religion because I believe that every religion, from Hinduism, from Buddhism, from every religion, have merits in them. How can we, or anybody who are into the law of attraction, since my audience is actually into the law of attraction, how can we connect to the divine, and how can we co-create our reality?
Okay, you mentioned before, you talked about Aten, the sun god, right? And that's the sun disk that has the rays of light coming out, and it has hands that are reaching out to you. And you'll see Akhenaten has hands that are reaching back to the sun god. And it's really, I think, being a religious person is an understanding that the entire natural world is the body of what I'll call the divine. You don't have to say that it's Buddha or Atman or Ra or Zeus or, you know, whatever, Yahweh. It's all the divine, whatever Allah, whatever you want to call it, whatever beautiful name you wish to give to this creative power. It's seeing it in everything that's around you. And to me, that's what the ancient Egyptians did. Their word for a god or a goddess was NTR, which we say netter. They called it nature, and when the Greeks were talking about it, they called it nature. And that's natural law. It's the learning to understand how the body of the divine works, and then being a co-creator with the divine is learning how to use those natural laws in your own co-creative capacities, the law of polarity, the law of mind, the law of karma or cause and effect, the law of environment. There's just like a lot of different things that we learn about, laws of attraction.
How did you get into this law of attraction? Because I know that, because I actually wanted to talk about that too. Because I read it in your book, you talk about the law of attraction, and that's why I wanted to help a lot of people, right? My mission is to be able to help a lot of law of attraction people who are stuck and want to bring them to the light where they can utilize their gift, because I can see it, they're suffering. And how can, if they've been studying for years, but they can't somehow get their dream to happen, how can they utilize the law of attraction effectively? Like all the laws that you just talked about, the natural laws, how can we use them?
Right, like attracts like. And so in part, you know, like I counsel a lot of people who want to have a good relationship, who say, I've been in these terrible relationships and I'm tired of being in a bad relationship. And I just keep seeming to attract these negative people, right? So what do I do to change that? Okay. And the answer to that, of course, is you have to change yourself. You have to know what kind of person you're trying to attract, and then to be like that person. You know, that is, you have to shift inside yourself in order to attract that which is beyond you. Now, if you say, you know, I'm always in these relationships with these men who have, like, you know, they're either alcoholics or drug addicts. And then the answer is, well, are you going to a bar and trying to find someone? Because that's the problem. You know what I'm saying? So you have to really be clear and honest and really look inside yourself at what is it that you believe. That's the first thing. What is it that you believe? What is it that you yourself desire in order to attract? Like attracts like. And many of us, you know, we go through our lives and we have to get rid of so much of our bad habits and our negative thoughts, you know, and like, okay, so say, for example, I know this woman who fell down, and even as she's falling, and I thought, good Lord, you know, she might break an arm. Even as she's falling, she says, I'm okay. And when she hopped up, she was okay. I was like, wow, now that's a really positive thought, you know. But she totally believed that her angel was going to catch her and she was all right, you know. And in truth, that's what happened, you know. I think that we have to allow ourselves the opportunity to work through our own karma to attract what we want, because a lot of that is the negatives are working out our karma. You know, if we're trying to attract the love of our life, then the problem is that we have not learned in a past life how to be loving. And so we learn to be loving, and then we attract that. If we are trying to attract money, we have to figure out, what is it I want to do with that money? Is it just for me, or is it for someone else? Am I working for the betterment of my society and humanity? How am I returning? You know, the law of perpetual return. How am I returning what I'm attracting to myself? Because it's constantly, you have to bring in, give out. I mean, that's the whole thing behind tithing, which is why tithing works so well in so many churches and religious traditions, because it comes in and you give it out, comes in, you give it out. If it comes in and you keep it, then, you know, and we know churches that have done that, it becomes sullied, and eventually it's not a good thing.
Right.
So, yeah.
What, sorry, but thank you so much, because I was thinking about how when you're talking about the law of, what was it, transformation or transmute, what was it?
Transmutation.
Because basically, when it's almost as if when you were talking about, it's the law of correspondence, right? As within,
Right.
right, and then, but also, because I interview Dennis William Hawk, right? He's the author of
Oh yeah, love him.
Yeah, he's an amazing guy. I love him too. And we were talking about the Ouroboros, right? And how our energy, our whole world changes if we change the inner world. Because my message about people is they haven't changed their inner world, and they're trying to increase their vibration, right? But my message is different. Once you change your inner world, you start to attract different people. Because I noticed that as I change, I attract different amazing people in my life, right? And
Right.
and you know how we don't look at the as above and so below, because I was thinking about the as above so below. It's like Ouroboros. Everything is Ouroboros, and I look at it like our energy when we send it out, it come back like you say, right? And it's so,
Right.
and I was like, wow, yeah, that's how like the universe works. Thank you so much.
Right. It's like when you're standing in the river and you drop a pebble in the water, and the circles go out until they hit the bank, and then they start coming back into the circle again. You know, so it's like it's always reaching its edge and then coming back to center. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, and I hope that it can help a lot of people who are into the law of attraction. And now, this one, I hear a lot, but because I try to be humble, and I don't want to be like any. A lot of people are not humble, but I try to be. What is ascended masters? Because I hear you talk about it in one of your interview, and I don't know what that is. I mean, I hear it in one of the spiritual world, but I don't know what it is.
What are ascended masters?
Yes.
Well, let's see. I've studied a lot of the work of Alice Bailey, and she was a theosophist, and an ascended master named DK came and spoke through her, and basically, like a Jane Roberts, but earlier than Jane Roberts, channeled many books about the creation of our world, cosmic consciousness, the creation of our world, the psychology, esoteric psychology. So basically, the story of Ascended Masters is that before humans were here, the Earth plane, the Earth plane was in crisis. This was in the time of Atlantis and Lemuria, and the Earth itself, which is a sentient being, sent out a call to the universe and said, help me because I'm being destroyed. And so the call was answered by a being whose name was Sanat Kumara. And Sanat Kumara, I would guess you would think of him as like being almost like an Uriel, an archangel of archangel, or a Melchizedek or someone, but different. Anyway, Sanat Kumara heard the call and sent 7 rays to Earth, which are the 7 rays of these 7 ascended masters. And they are the ones who oversee things like the power of the will, the power of love, the power of communication, the power of divine devotion, the power of arts and sciences, etc. I think there are two more. Somehow I'm leaving two out. How to turn conflict into, the law of opposition, how to turn conflict into unity and understanding, and so on. So these 7 ray masters came out, and then there are other ascended master beings that work with them. In fact, there's 114 light beings that work and help people in spiritual dimensions. So, but anyway, you can read more about it by going to the Lucius Trust Foundation. There's a lot of information on the Ascended Masters there.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. What does, because I'm always so curious, because in the book they have the Eye of Horus. What does the Eye of Horus actually mean, or what does it actually?
Well, it's the third eye. It's the Ajna chakra, and it. If you think of a hawk's eye, it sees higher than human eyes because it's way up above. It's got like a higher spiritual dimension. And a hawk, of course, its vision is so keen, and it looks with a single eye down into the ground, and it can see like a little mouse moving a blade of grass. And so the Eye of Horus is that all-seeing, perceptive eye that has symbolically a spiritual dimension. And there's a phrase in the Bible, I think it talks about, if thine eye be single, how much you can see, but it's really talking about this spiritual eye, not, one-eyed, but spiritual eye.
Oh, it's a spiritual eye. Okay. Well, I was gonna say, how can we activate the third eye?
Well, that would be it. Do you know that your third eye, like a bird's eye, is activated by light? Okay, so your pineal gland, which is right behind where your third eye is, in a bird, it responds to the light. It's like the length of light tells it when it's time to fly south and when it's time to come back home. It tells it when it's time to lay eggs and when it's time to build the nest. And so everything is related to how much light enters into that third eye. So when you are meditating, it's important to activate in your meditations, to activate that third eye. But it's also important to be out in the physical light, because I think that it also works that way as well. Now, some people we know are sensitive to the darkness and need, they need sort of like solar lights or something in their house so that they can have more light. Those salt lamps that can be illuminated to look like sunlight, all of that helps with improving your third eye consciousness. Having rainbow light, crystals in the window, that type of thing helps improve the amplification of light in your consciousness. But really, it's about seeking light and pushing to light all the time.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And I was thinking about, oh yeah, in one of your books, you said can you talk about your experience with Kuro Museum and your favorite statue, Ramses Nahert? I'm saying it wrong.
Okay, which statue is that?
I can't say the name right. It's Ramses?
Ramses?
Yeah, or Ramsey, yeah.
Okay.
No, can you talk about your experience? How did it feel to you? You say it's one of your favorite statues. What did you see? And
I can't remember what I said there. Read me the passage and then I'll tell you.
Okay, let me see. Okay, let me find it. Don't worry, I will edit in the
I'm sorry, it's like I've written so many books, I can't remember what I said.
Sorry about that. Okay, here we go. I love walking through the Cairo Museum, looking at the
Cairo.
yeah, of the script and priests and priestess. One evening, I went into the museum and found myself gazing rhythmically into the face of Rimzi Nakhur, one 1150 BCE, one of my favorite statue.
Okay, so that's the one that has the baboon on his head, right? Ramses Nacht. Yeah, he's one of the scribes from, I believe he was from Hermopolis, the city of Thoth. And Thoth has a baboon shape, not just the ibis head, but he also had a baboon shape. And, you know, I had never been to Hermopolis before, but I just recently went in February and March and actually saw the city where that statue came from. And there was a necropolis or a cemetery that had all these mummified baboons in it. And the story was that in order to learn how to be a priest of Thoth, you went to Hermopolis, you studied the sacred texts, and you had to carry around a baboon on your shoulders for a couple of years. It was like your pet baboon. And the baboon kind of taught you humility. You know, it taught you the secret of you know, because it's like it has its head on top of your head in the statue, and the scribe is like looking at the text and he's like dreaming, but the statue of the baboon is looking right at you. It's like looking right into your soul. I mean, its eyes are so alive, and so there's that statue is like the dreaming self and the super conscious self were like right next together. And that's why I was so excited about that particular scribe, because he seemed to me to be the epitome of how sacred inspiration works for writers, you know, and that's why I liked that statue so much.
Right. Okay. When you said sacred inspiration, what is
inspiration? Yeah.
Like, oh, okay. I would like to. Okay, before that, what is your passion and what do you love to do?
Sacred inspiration. I mean, I think that's it. I love to write. I love to allow myself to empty out and to let the divine beings that are out there speak through me. I mean, I really enjoy that. Some people would call it trance writing or automatic writing or inspired writing. I like to write poetry. I like to read poetry. And I'm hoping, I'm going to just say this out loud. One of these days I'm going to pass into spirit, and while I'm on my deathbed, I hope somebody grabs a book of poetry and starts reading to me, because that'll make me so happy and send me right out, you know. I love poems. I love painting. I love working with spirit, reading cards, doing astrological charts, talking with people about what makes them tick, kind of just like you. It's the same thing, sacred inspiration. That's where it's all at.
Okay, thank you so much. Before that, I was so close. I had it, but now I lost it. I lost it because you were talking, and then I was so into your story. Okay, I got it. Okay. I remember because I watched a couple of your interviews, and you were talking about you embody a spirit, but I forgot what type of spirit, and you were always talking about it. Can you explain that to me more, please?
You mean clairvoyance?
Yeah.
Yeah, I work as a clairvoyant medium.
Mm-hmm.
And so what that means is that basically I use my spiritual sensing. Clairaudience is hearing. Clairsentience is like where you get physically, you feel the energy of another being or spirit on you. And those are all things that I do as a spiritualist, working in the tradition that I have, where, you know, as a medium, messages from spirit. I like to do that.
But you're so humble, though. But the thing is, when I
What? Oh, what do you mean?
it's because like, um, a lot of spiritual people like I have because basically I've been trying to get my message out there and trying to help a lot of people because I see a lot of people hurting, and they want me to be someone different and try to push their message into believing what I believe. Like I believe that I'm spiritual and I know that psychic is it's available to anyone, and I believe that in my own right, right? And but
Right.
but there's a spiritual person or she do psychic reading and she told me not to seek. She told because I like to do interviews, right? And it's my dream, and she pushed me
Uh-huh.
right, and she said all the answers within. I believe that the answers within when it comes to nature, when it comes to yourself, when it comes to the universe, yes. But in other like for instance like a book, I don't know how to write a book. I don't have any experience on that. That's why I ask authors. I love to be able to speak with my favorite author like yourself, and I would like to be
Or
able to.
Neil Gaiman.
But yeah, so that's why I said you're so humble because I want to be able to help a lot of people to be humble again because we don't see like when we try to teach people, we try to go up high, right? And we don't like talk to them into like a lower, you know. That's why I say you're humble.
Oh, well, thank you. That's very sweet of you to say. Very kind. I think that if you think too highly of yourself, uh, I'm just afraid I might be mistaken. So, so, so I mean, I try not to do that. I think that, as you said, most of the answers for a lifetime come from within. And, I mean, it's crazy, but even after I wrote Awakening Osiris, which so many people have written to me and told me that book made a difference to them, and they read it when they go to Egypt and they read it at funerals. I mean, I had someone who said she read one of my pieces from Awakening Osiris at Jerry Garcia's funeral. It's like, really? That's amazing. What did I say? Because I didn't know what she would have thought was important. And really, it just comes from out of you. And if it touches someone else, Johnny, if it touches someone else, that's great, in whatever way it happens for you. You don't have to be a famous author to be able to touch someone else. All you have to do is be someone in love with your life. That's all you have to do.
Thank you
You
so
know?
much. I appreciate that the message that you said that to me. That's very touching me. I'm thankful for that. I when you did the when you accepted my interview, I went because I love your work so much. I went to bought another book of yours, but I can't remember what the book was. But I wanted to read that. It was invoking the Egypt or something.
Invoking the scribes.
No, invoking the Scribe or Egypt because it had the like it was a red cover.
Oh, the union of Isis and Thoth. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's one I wrote with my collaborator, Nikki Scully. And the union of Isis and Thoth is really about the 20 years that she and I worked together to build an Egyptian temple and do the Egyptian mysteries on her land. And she's dedicated to Thoth, and I'm dedicated to Isis. And so the two of us, would bring these mystery schools together during the summer for a week. And it's about how to build a mystery temple in your own space, whether it's outside in your garden or inside your own heart, you know. Um, and that's basically what that book's about. I loved doing that. I loved doing that book with her. And I loved doing mystery schools with her. I haven't seen her for years. She's had some health issues, and so is her husband. So God bless them both. I'm hoping they're doing well. But that's what that book is about. That was our culminating of 20 years of work together.
Right, you talk about mystery school. Can you explain? Because basically in the other book I actually want to interview her later. But um, th- like these Egypt also evolve around mystery schools, right? Egypt's right, or I forgot what's it called, where they become Nephilim and initiate something like that. I can't remember.
Right.
I'm rusty. I'm rusty. But yeah, can you explain to that?
Oh, to become an initiate of something? Well, um, I would say, gosh, I'm trying to think of how to answer that. I became a high priestess of Isis and was initiated into her temple by a woman named Lady Olivia Robertson, who runs the Temple of Isis in Europe, in England, out of Clonigal Castle, and well, in the UK. And she passed into spirit at the age of 94 a couple of years ago. But she was the person who really initiated me into the tradition. And I can remember I was invited to speak at the Temple of Isis, and she said, "And we'll initiate you there." And I was like, "But Lady Olivia, I mean, I didn't study with you. I didn't go to a school, so I don't really know how you can initiate me." And she just looked at me and she said, "Oh, my dear, you've done so much work. You love the goddess. It pours out of your skin. What other initiation is there?" And I thought, oh, that's it. So a lot of people create mystery schools with levels of, you have to go through this rite or that rite. The truth of the matter is, if you let the divine overshadow you and work through you, you're in initiation all the time. If you see yourself, and this is what the union of Isis and Thoth is about, if you see yourself as a temple for the divine spirit of the creator in whatever capacity you see that, then you are being initiated into a spiritual tradition.
Wow, that's so deep. That's really deep. Like, yeah, yeah, because I was reading the book of Your Invisible Power by Genevieve B. Rand, and we are we are work like that's what the whole about the law of attraction. We're work God or divine is working through us, right?
Right,
Right,
right.
and because there's so many motivational speakers that I look up to. They said that we're a vessel for God to do God's work, or Bob Proctor. You know about
Exactly.
Bob? You know about Bob Proctor?
Yes.
Yes, and I look up to a lot of Bob Proctor stuff, and he always say that what is God? God is creation, and we're here to do God work, and we're here to create things, right? And that's what my message for all these. That's why I do these interviews, so people could see that they can really do anything what they want in their gift. Because so many of the time, long time ago, I felt unworthy. Oh, before that, you know about the spiritual awakening?
Yeah, what about?
Oh no, because basically that's what happened to my uh life. I was becoming aware. I was sleeping my whole life, right? And I becoming aware that we're not powerless. We have the power to evolve. We can do things with our mind, and it's really amazing. Um, but how did you? What is for you? What is your interpretation of spiritual awakening for you?
Oh, wow. Um, sometimes I don't know. I mean, sometimes it's when God smacks you over the head, and usually uh, it doesn't feel good the first time. um, I had someone ask me one time, they said, "You're such a visionary. How is it that you learned to be such a good seer?" And I was kidding, sort of, but maybe not really. And I said, "Oh, I took a lot of drugs when I was young." And then I said, "No, I'm not saying that's the way to do it, but I fell down so many times, um, spiritually bruised myself, was in such an addictive pattern that I was like, I don't need to do that anymore. You know, I just need to, I can get there without doing that, and I learned to bring that euphoric feeling that I was after when I was in an addictive pattern, to bring that in when I was not being an addict, to just bring it in to my heart and feel it. And, so I worked really hard on how to manifest that feeling inside me. And then I just practiced keeping it there as long as I could keep it there, you know. And what made me keep it there was learning to write, was learning to paint, was learning to read hieroglyphs. That's what kept that magic inside me for so long. And I didn't need any of that other stuff, you know. So, I mean, I know people can go and do a lot of different trancing. You can do trancing through drumming, you know. You can do trancing through a number of different ceremonies. Like I'm going to a ceremony in which we stay awake all night for 4 days, you know, and that's going to be a very different type of experience and a kind of spiritual awakening, because anytime you're shifting out of your normal reality through a process like that, you're going to come back changed. Sacred travel does that to people. Go to a culture in which you everything that you look at is different, you know, so you have to see yourself differently in that culture. That's a spiritual awakening, you know. Learning to see that that's a reflection of who you are, you know. Walking into, recently I went to Scotland for the first time. You know, I've always gone to Egypt. First times it was like, you know, wow, wake up, Normandy. Now I went to Scotland at the age of 60 plus. I went to Scotland and it just blew my mind, because everything that I was seeing was a reflection of something that I had seen in another culture, but had seen within myself as well. So sacred travel is a way to expand your consciousness. So I don't think you have to look for it in substances. I think it's already there in almost everything we do, if we just do it with awareness and consciousness.
How do we develop awareness or consciousness, or how do we expand it?
Well, you could be going down the street and then pinch yourself. Wake up. I'm serious. You know, it's a mindset. It really is law of mind, just like what you were talking about. It's a mindset. Consciousness is everywhere around us. I was giving a talk the other day about something I had read where scientists, astrophysicists, were talking about how they now believe that galaxies communicate with each other. How do galaxies communicate with each other? In the same way that neurons inside our brain communicate with each other through the synapses, right? The same way our cells communicate with each other. They don't communicate by being next to each other. It's the space between them that creates consciousness. It's the proximity to something else that creates consciousness, because it's more like a mirror. I'm not one and the same with what I'm looking at, you know, but it's slightly away from me. Do you know what I mean? You and I are creating consciousness, you know, over these phones that we're talking on. You know, there's a slight space between us, but the consciousness is the conversation that we're going through and that other people are going to be hearing later. That's part of that. That's how it works.
Oh, wow. But the thing is, when you explain it, I finally grasped like understanding of consciousness. This is very deep how you explain it. I was like, wow. I was like sitting there for
Well, you know, I mean, it's the same thing when someone says, do you meditate? And you go, how do you meditate? Well, you empty out your mind. Well, why are you emptying out your mind? So that there's a space, a slight space between you and the divine, which is trying to come in.
right. Right. And also, but before that, we all because I know you always talk about meditation, and on in this video, because I read that there's so many form of way of meditation. Because I'm about on Monday I'm interviewing a Tai Chi. It's a Tai Chi is also a form of meditation.
Yes.
Right. And so many of sometimes we forget that Tai Chi. I mean, meditation doesn't have to be like sitting down. Right.
Right. Right.
Right.
Taking a walk, walking meditations. Right.
Right. Before two more questions, and we will let you go. How do we develop our intuition? Because when I was going through my spiritual awakening, I was developing my intuition. How can we develop them?
Okay, that's a good question. One of the things that I learned, first thing is meditation. That's the first thing I learned. The second thing that I learned is that when something comes to you, and it's like there's a thought in your head or something that comes from out of nowhere, and we'll think, is that me or is that somebody else thinking that? Is that something else thinking that? Or is that me? I learned to look at something and ask my guides to tell me, to be with me when I'm working on my intuition, when I'm reading. When I'm reading, I ask my guides to be there with me when I'm reading, so that if something is important, it kind of like there's a moment where I might stumble over a word and go, wait a minute, what did that say? And that's my guide sort of like going, okay, wake up. What is that? And then I'll write it down. So the same thing then when I get used to working with my guides, I get used to hearing them when I'm intuiting something. And what we say here at camp is give what you get. Don't doubt it. Don't think, is that me? Is that somebody else? What does that have to do with anything? Give what you get. Okay, say for example, I had a friend call me up the other day and said, are you going to Virginia? And I said, I don't think so, but tell me why you think I'm going to Virginia. And she said, well, I don't know. I just had this dream that you were going to Virginia. And I said, well, that's pretty interesting because I've been dreaming about my mother and her name is Virginia. So it's like, that was the intuitive message. She wasn't sure what she got, but she gave it to me anyway. And that confirmed that the dreams I'd been having about my mother were accurate because it came from someone else telling me that. And I had been given a second message previously that my mother, who's in spirit and who, God bless her, always wanted to be a writer and never made it published, though she wrote all the time, wants me to begin to sit in meditation with her and let her do the writing. And so I'm going to Virginia to my mother to let her write. And I was having dreams about her. 3 times that message came to me in 3 different ways. And that made me think, okay, that's true. How do you develop that intuition? You just let it come out. You work with your guides, you meditate, and you give what you get.
Yeah, sorry. As you were talking about it, I was getting goosebumps. I was like, wow, oh my god. What does success look like to you?
It looks like being able to talk to Johnny. It does. Success to me is being able to meet someone and really feel understood and appreciated just for who I am in the moment that we're in. I don't look for more than that. Success to me is the love that I feel in the people around me.
Well, thank you so much for that. Like, as we were talking, I can feel you're so kind and generous. That's why I love doing this talk to you. Thank you so much. But before, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
Oh no, I was asking because you keep talking about reading. I noticed over the years because basically I'm trying to solve a lot of people problem, but I observe on online, and I don't want to bash anyone on it, but a lot of psychics. I'm psychic, but people don't think that is. But I'm psychic. But psychic people don't get scared. Oftentimes we get scared of words like occult, but occult just means hidden, or psychic. If you take out the psyche, it means soul or the mind, right? Like psychology, right? We get scared, so that's why I'm trying to break the habit of people thinking like weird stuff, right? So I often sometimes people brag about that they don't read and stuff like that, and they would say like knowledge is limited. But oftentimes, but I hear you like to read. How come that is?
Oh, well, I like to read because my mother read to me when I was a child. She read to me when I was in her belly. She she recited poetry to me in order to get me to eat mashed potatoes or peas or whatever. I would just sit there with my mouth open and listen to her. Um, words are words are like flowers to me. I love all of their different flavors and textures and colors and scents, and I just love language. It's part of who I am, and that's why I read, because it's like, T.S. Eliot's poetry is giving me another kind of flower, in the same way that, what's that wonderful woman who wrote E Squared, Pam Grout, is a
Yeah,
different kind of flower. Yeah,
yeah,
like Dennis Huck has a different kind of flower. Hermes Trismegistus has a different kind of flower. I like them all. I love a big bouquet of language.
right.
Um,
Thank you.
yeah,
Yeah, I interviewed Pam Grouse. She's an amazing lady. She's
she
amazing.
is pretty amazing. I've never met her, but I like her. I have
Yeah,
her books. I like her a lot.
yeah, I like her a lot. But also, because basically, I noticed like I'm almost just like you, right? I am intuitive, but I'm psychic, but I'm spiritual, but I'm not spiritual. Like what I mean? Like I am connected with the divine universe. I'm connected, but in essence, but I also love to read, just like you, right? And sometimes I feel hurt because like I want to be able to join the spiritual people, but they don't accept knowledge. They throw away. I I sometimes struggle with my message because I want to sometimes rescue people from seeing that there's so many diverse people that's why I interview a lot of diverse people to be able to see different perspective, and I
Right.
love, and I want to be able to say like how can you deal with people, I mean not deal with people, but like how can you combine the imagination and knowledge together, right? Because I have to love, because basically what happened is knowledge saved me it, because I was in special education, and that's one of my mission is to be able to impact special education, or impact to change the way that teacher teach things, because I was in bondage, right? I was, when you label a kid a special education or saying they have
Right.
disability, and they can't release their potential. It's like the Matrix, the movie The Matrix. People are in bondage, like they're living in a dream world, but they can't get out of it, right?
Right.
And
Right.
they're
Right.
right, and they're not releasing who they are, and that's why I want to wake people up, saying, look, you can either take the blue pill or the red pill, right? So, but anyway, go ahead. Like, how can we combine that creativity and knowledge together? Because I've seen that with you.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think that I really agree with what you're saying, especially when you started talking about special ed. There's this book by a man named Howard Gardner who talks about multiple ways of thinking, which actually has to do with imagining the world into existence. I worked uh, before what I'm doing now and living in Chesterfield. I worked as an artist in the schools, and my primary group of individuals was special ed, because I really thought these are kids that have a different way of thinking. The regular school system is not helping them. So I'm going to do things like teach them a fun way to learn something. And so I would go into these special ed classes, and we would make pop-up books of ancient Egypt, and so they're learning history, and they're learning how to use math, because you have to be able to use a ruler and add and subtract, and to do that you have to use art. You're learning geometry, you're learning mythology, you're learning how to read hieroglyphs, you're learning all kinds of science, how to mummify something. It's like all of a sudden you're learning everything just by doing a pop-up book in ancient Egypt. And I would go into a classroom, and I mean, we had the best time. We had the best time because I did work with hands, work with heart, work with head, and it's like every way of manifesting something. And I think that that's important, that that is the way to build a community, is employ everybody in making something, you know?
Right. Thank you so much. Yeah, there's so many intelligences, but sometimes I feel like um, people, uh, put grades, right? I remember I would I feel so pressured in high school that I have to keep up with everybody else because I love to skip school because it's a habit. It's a habit. But um, the day that I skipped school, they kicked me out of high school. But people think that, oh, you shouldn't be like your older brother. They think that I made the mistake, but they didn't know that after they kicked me out of high school, that day changed my life. It I went that day was the greatest day of my life. And then when I went to boarding school, that was where I met new friends, new experiences. My life changes, right? And
Right,
right, and then I start having weird experiences. Well, not weird, but amazing experiences with the law of attraction and everything else. Just like I began to become aware with my inner world. Like I feel like we can like I don't know how to explain it. It's just like I feel like we some oftentimes we have a blinders, right? A belief system that held us back. My truth may be different today. I mean, it may be today will be it'll be different tomorrow, right?
right.
Right.
Somebody gave you a mask to wear in high school, and when they kicked you out, you were allowed to take it off.
Thank you so much.
And then you could see, yeah, then you could see clearly.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, but thank you. But I didn't know because when you were talking about that, you were a special education teacher. I was like, whoa, wow, that's what I was trying to do, like trying to like reach teachers. And wow, like I feel like I've been like interviewing people who are teachers, like, but they're entrepreneurs and well, they are teachers, right? Authors and best selling. Everyone is a teacher, but we often don't sometimes see it.
Right.
Um, but yeah, but thank you for being so kind. Okay, I'll see you. All right.
All right. So I'm going to have to go now, Johnny, but I want to say thank you for this wonderful interview. It was gorgeous.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you.
Yes. And blessings on your path. And I hope to talk to you again some other time in the future. Okay.
Yes, yes.
You know where to find me.
I will. I will. Thank you so much. Bye bye now.
Okay, hon.